Thank you very much. Good morning.
Have you heard any news from the network? Have you been renewed?
I have heard unofficial good word, but that is about as far as I can say at this point. It's kind of like waiting for your report card to come in or something. But they have been very supportive of us, and we have a very good feeling about it. So
it's a wonderful new series,
Thank you.
Stockard. It really is. It's interesting to watch a woman in the throes of getting a divorce, trying to reacclimate herself to society, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting to me because we go through many different styles. Some weeks I think we're quite zany, and other weeks we try to, any subject we deal with that's at all serious subject, we try to deal with seriously in some way with the spice of it, you know. But there are some weeks that are just sort of hell's a-poppin' too, which life is kind of a bit like that too.
That's true. Why'd you set it in a sort of a health exercise spa?
Well, I don't know. It was an idea that came to us. This woman has gone to college and she's well educated, but she's been out of sort of the job market, and quite literally she couldn't get a job anywhere else. As we know in this whole corporate society we live in, unless you start at a certain point, a certain time, you can't get into it. So it was kind of a departure point, I think. But also I think it sort of connotes LA and modern life and people getting their bodies together and stuff. And also it's kind of in the new sort of village square. It's a co-ed club, people meet each other. We haven't done that much work there. But I like the characters that she meets. It's sort of for someone who comes from a kind of academic background, who lives in her head a lot, she meets a lot of earthy people. It's a good meeting ground for lots of different types of people.
Do you really think all of us are obsessed with self, as the media says we are?
God, they even have a magazine now. I couldn't believe it. It's called Self. I think it probably is true. There's an awful lot of that going on. Maybe in the 60s there was that pushed outward to change society, to become part of a movement, if you will. And
well, it was sort of to fix your head.
Yeah, and now people are fixing up their bodies. I don't know. Maybe it's like they figure we're all in this alone.
And that's why I was wondering why, if you purposely set the series in that's kind of an atmosphere.
Well, I think that it's, you know, you have conversations in a health club. People are obsessed with what they are, how long they're going to live, how they appear to other people, will they get ahead. There's an awful lot of that. And this woman comes from a more traditional society. She's from Boston, the East Coast, as I come from, and we sort of use her as a foil for a lot of the stuff that goes on in Los Angeles and in sort of modern life today, and being single today for the first time, you know, in like 7 years.
I was just going to ask you, knowing that you come from a traditional background,
yeah.
Do you find that you are this girl today in other areas, even though you're presently married? I
have been this girl. I mean, that's one of the reasons I felt this character would be comfortable for me, because I was divorced myself when I was 23, and I remember that feeling because I'd been with my husband since I was 17. We were in college together. We met in college, and I got married out of college, and spent my early 20s sort of the traditional married woman. And when we divorced and I went into the world really very young, I remember the feeling of feeling so out of step and feeling awkward. I didn't really know how to go out on dates and stuff. I've been, you know, when you're in college, you just sort of play around and one thing leads to another. I remember feeling old too. I felt, gosh, I'm so old. The world is 18. That's all I could think of. And now it's a couple of years after that, but I remember that period. And I remember that time of adjustment. And I thought that people, whether they're male or female, whether they're changing a job, as people would sometimes do when they're 50 now, or they leave a job, they start working, there's a lot of mobility in our society today. And I thought people might be able to relate to this girl who is choosing a new life for herself out of choice, not out of, you know, because her husband had died, or not because she was fired from a job, but because she made this decision to actually change her life.
Is life different when you've done it a second time? I mean, you were divorced twice.
Yeah.
This is your third marriage.
Yeah.
But is it different when you know what it's all about, being divorced and trying to go outside again?
Well, for me, I think it has a lot to do where you are in your life, how old you are, both your actual age and your mental, emotional age. There's no way I could have stayed married as the person I was when I was 19 and 20, whether it had been my first husband or even my present husband. And he also had been married around that age. And we talk about how life is different, that you don't blame it on the partner, you don't blame it on yourself, but there are seasons, I believe, in life, and there are beginning, middle, and ends, and sometimes something that seems to be ending, you can pick it up and you find a new beginning within the same relationship, within the same job, whatever. But I feel that there are different seasons in one life, and I'm in a good one right now. I'm in a very happy marriage, and I have nothing against the people I've been married to and vice versa before this. It's a very amicable situation, but I believe when the time is right, that's when things fall into place.
Your husband helped create this series for you.
Yes.
I can only imagine that as the creator, one of the creators of the series, you must work together, frequently, and you must be with one another
Every day.
practically 24 hours
Yeah.
a day. What does that do to the marriage, being with somebody morning, noon, and night?
Well, I tell you, we were with each other more at the beginning of our relationship because it was madly in love. It was like nobody left the house, it was all of that. Now we get up in the morning and we go to the studio, and I go to the soundstage and work, and he goes to the office. So we find we don't have that much time with each other. We work two ends of the same stick, if you will. And at night we come home where there's a lot of emphasis on on the work and the business and how's the show this week and all of that. And the weekends are really what we spend with each other. But the nice part is that at the end of the day, like most married people, who don't see each other that much, but we know what we're talking about. We have the same life. We're in the same business, so we have an awful lot in common when we are together.
Do you have any conflicts, though, meaning that if he says you should do something one way and you disagree with him, what happens then?
We work it out. I mean, we did the television show. We also did the Kitty O'Neill movie, Silent Victory. And we've been married for 4 years, and when I'm doing a movie, I talk to him about the part, and he goes to dailies and stuff. And sometimes we disagree, but we seem to work it out, and we never have had that kind of conflict where I say, well, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it my way. Because I usually listen to him because we have very similar basic responses to things. And there's a reason why we're not agreeing. We try to find out what it is. Maybe it's just literally we don't quite understand what the other one's saying. That happens a lot.
When I watch you act, I find you to be extremely individualistic. You're different. You're not like a lot of other people in the business. And yet, in your personal life, you seem to have done a lot of things that your other peer groups did too, such as getting married at an early age, because many people during that period went off immediately and had to get on with it, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's like a dichotomy there. Can you explain it?
I think I know what you're saying. It's very interesting you should say that. I've always had how can I put it? In my first marriage, for example, I could have stayed married. It wasn't a horrible, disastrous thing. We weren't sort of doing horrible, mean things to each other. But there was always a pull for me to go out and do something else. And when I found acting, I remember I said, something is happening to me. I am responding to this procedure, to this process, more than I've ever responded to anything, any experience in my life, because it fascinates me. And I think probably anybody who has that in their life, whether it's writing, whether it's any creative enterprise, whether some people it's business, they're very creative, they make huge sort of empires, or they make great shoes, I don't know. Whatever that thing is that gets all cylinders going and gets you keyed up, it's such a fantastic experience that probably it does sort of pull you together and you become an individual, it draws you, it's like acting choices. If you see a part and you say, why do I want to do it this way? I don't know, it feels right this way, so you're pulled to it, as opposed to following what somebody else might have done or imitating. But in my own personal life, I have the same influences on me, the same sort of tugs, probably the similar problems that most people do have, I didn't sort of live in an ivory tower. Maybe that's the balance between the two, I don't know. It's hard to know about yourself.
I also find it rather interesting, though, Stockard, that in the series, it seems to me, no matter what happens, you always best the situation. Is that how you view life?
No, I think that's just sitcom. I don't know. Not always. I think I like to see that she learns something. Sometimes usually my character, Susan Hughes, goes out on a limb and gets her head snapped off almost, and then she learns something from the situation.
But that's really besting the situation,
yeah,
too.
Ultimately, learning from it, I suppose that's sort of a formula that happens in most things. I mean, if you left her high and dry somewhere, who knows? There is a situation coming up, our next, the show after this one, where she has her first affair, if you will, on television, and that's sort of a first. He actually stays over, and it doesn't end totally happily. It ends realistically, and I'm looking forward to that because I know that there's a true life situation.
Based on your own life experience?
Based on most people I know's life experience, the one that got away and all of that, I mean, she really, for the first time, finds her deep emotions being stirred, and she has to deal with the pain that she can't have everything she wants.
Has that happened to you?
Sure, I think it happens to everybody. There's many relationships that you like each other, everything's wonderful, but you're at different places in your life, and he's not into a deep relationship, and and you find yourself longing for one. I mean, that's part of the pain. I mean, not everybody's a villain. There's not always a hero and a villain in life. So I'm looking forward to that as a situation that'll be realer, I think, than others.
But for some reason, Hollywood has managed over the years to create the so-called hero and the villain.
Yeah.
And I think many people out there have begun living their lives thinking that that's the way life really is.
Well, that's rough if you believe that.
Well, I don't know if that's the case
Yeah,
today, but I think
yeah.
that's what happened for many years,
Yeah.
that Hollywood really, I mean, it had its imprimatur on a society. It created a whole world for people, and people thought that that's the way life had to be. If you didn't hear bells ring, that means you weren't in love with someone.
It's funny because you do television, it's such an enormous impact. So many people see it, and you feel a responsibility. I mean, I say, well, there's a lot of kids who watch or would like to watch the show if they can stay up that late, and they've seen Grease, you know, and they on the street. That's what they remember me from. And I realize these kids watching this show, and I say, I feel a responsibility that every now and then we should give them a little hint that it's not all black and white, it's not all villains, and that you can cope easily with disappointment. You know, I mean, I think television does have that responsibility. It's a great entertainment, and it's wonderful to show total giggles, but I do feel that we should help, you know, younger people especially along and let them understand the nuances of life, you know, and because sometimes if you feel, if I'm not the hero, if I didn't win, does that make me the loser, or am I the villain? You know, and you're growing up and life really isn't that like that.
No, but talking about images that are created, I think I grew up feeling that when you were wealthy, you never had to worry about anything, that life was always terrific. You could buy anything you want. You could have anybody you want. You came from an affluent family. And I understand, though, you have said on occasion that you were really, though, very lonely.
Yes.
And you let me believe that you've been somewhat unhappy.
Yes, I have been in my life. I went to boarding school, which was a happy experience. I left home when I was about 12. And after the age of about 17, I sort of left that rather affluent nest. So there's been a good 10, 15 years which were spent on my own and out there, you know, without the umbilical cord of money or whatever. But I was a child who led a very rich fantasy life and was extremely shy and, you know, sort of lived in the closet, if you will. I mean, when I was by myself, I was incredibly flamboyant, this, that, and the other. I was a ballet dancer, I was everything, but the minute that I heard, you know, I felt that I was going to be caught, you know, I was going to be exposed, I sort of sat there and I pulled myself back in, and it was part of my sort of experience in life was to get out there and show yourself, which acting is a help, it's an aid, you know, you're protected by the lights and the cameras and everything, but in life, it's hard to sort of bring yourself out.
But did your parents impose certain restrictions on you, which is why you felt that if they saw you in this flamboyant kind of fantasy role, that would mean that Stockard's not a nice little girl?
Well, I was raised with a lot of rules. How you dressed, how you sat, how you ate your food. Children are seen but not heard. It was an extremely strict upbringing, and it was also one that was like, if you don't behave this way, you're not going to be liked, you're not going to be accepted. There was that kind of pressure, which I think happens to a lot of kids, I mean, from my generation or before. I don't know how much is going on now. I mean, I'm not a kid now. But and when I was growing up, it was very much, if you don't do it this way, you come back from the dance, who did you dance with? Did you dance at all? And I took it very hard. I was that kind of kid. You know, I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the way I took it. And I was raised with an awful lot of rules, which I later learned could be broken, and which was a great relief, you know, that there's more than one way to do it. But so I kind of kept trying to follow orders a lot.
Do you want to have children?
I like kids, and I like them. I think at this stage, I would not want to have a child that I couldn't say, well, I'm giving you a lot out of my life. I was raised a lot by governesses or nurses. My parents would travel and whatever, and had a very sort of busy business social life. And it's not that it was a hardship, but it is sort of a hardship if they leave, you know.
Yes.
I mean, when you're 5 or 6 and there's a turnover in that human being in your life, we don't think about that. You know, we always think of the governess or something for a kid, but I'm aware of the realities of that. And also, I think it's no point in having a kid unless you can, you know, find out life is like through their eyes and experience it with them. And my time is such now that the quality of my time would probably be very poor for a child, and maybe that's something I won't be able to experience in my life. But I feel you have a responsibility to a child to give it the best and the purest kind of affection and interest you can.
People say the only reason to get married is to have children. Do you agree with that?
I don't think so. I'm obviously a marrier. And have been from an early age. You know, the potato chips, once you start, you can't stop. I don't know, but I'm
Or if at first you don't succeed, try again, yes.
both, you know. It's true, I am a marrier. I'm sort of a buddy system person. I guess I really like coming home and having this pal and a lover and a friend and a family. And maybe it's from a kind of loneliness from my childhood that I do tend to be drawn towards relationships. I'm sort of sequentially monogamous. But there are those of us who are that way, you know. So I found many reasons to get married aside from having children. I believe in it. I really do, and especially the way I'm married now, I feel definitely married. It's funny, all this legal business about, you know, well, we're not really married. That's a flip-flop on it, because obviously there are people who are drawn. They have the same kind of obligations. I mean, when you go to court and someone says, well, you see, the reason why I should get alimony is because I gave up my career, and there's all these traditional reasons for being married. And they did everything but, you know. They're even using the same arguments.
So are you saying, do you think that Michelle Marvin was deserving of something
I
or
didn't follow the
nothing?
case, to tell you the truth, at all. I read sort of, I mean, it just would come in, these sort of, I saw the case and I said, well, isn't this interesting? These people were, in effect, 95% there. I mean, where do you gauge that thing, you know? I mean, where did it start from? We're boyfriend, girlfriends, and we fool around and we spend the night together. I mean, there is a huge percentage there. Whereas before, you know, when I was growing up, people didn't live together, you know, they didn't go all the way unless they wanted to get in big trouble. And, you know, so then it was like you go 5% and then you better go the other 95 or you know what's going to happen. But now, well, so there's 5% and the one's going 25%. Well, we live together, but we also see other people. It's really confusing, you know, so maybe that's one of the reasons you say you're married. I believe in traditional marriage. I'm, you know, faithful to my husband and vice versa. We share experiences. We share our lives together. I mean, we really have no secrets from each other. Obviously, we spend time other places. I don't mean we walk around, you know, joined at the toe or something. But really, in the spirit of that, we went in with our eyes open. And there's a lot of confusion in those other areas. And I've been there. I mean, I've had affairs and sort of lived with people, whatever. And you never quite know where you're supposed to be pushing, and am I pushing too hard? Am I holding on? There's so many questions. It's difficult.
So for you, marriage is best?
For me, for now, yeah. Watch 6 months from now, I'll only go up in smoke.
No, there comes a time now, enough potato chips, and we go on to something else, right?
Time for a sandwich, you know, a real meal. Yeah, this is really a real experience. And, you know, you think about 10 years from now and 15 and 20 and all that.
I'm curious about one final thing. Having attained success, what do you folks think now, since obviously show business must have also been one of those restrictions?
How do you mean restrictions?
Well, I mean, obviously not something that a nice, proper girl went into, not a field that a nice, proper girl would go into.
I suppose. I've done it, so I mean, I've been in it for quite a number of years, maybe 12 years or something now, and when I left my marriage in that world that my parents existed in, I really left that world behind me, and all my options were open. I probably basically was never really a very conventional person, but once I broke that mold, literally leaving my first marriage, life became extraordinarily different, and I went into show business. I mean, I loved acting. So I didn't relate to that anymore because I had very little contact with that world I left. It's something that sort of gets lost in the shuffle when I read things written about me. I said, oh, well, if they want to say that I was, you know, living on Park Avenue up till about 4 months ago, that's their business, but it's not true. You know, I mean, I was shot out of a cannon in my early 20s, and I said, okay, here I am, no ties. You know, there was nobody calling me up and nudging me and saying, what'd you do today, where are you going? It was like I was born yesterday suddenly. So I didn't really relate to the other stuff. If anything, I probably reacted against it. I had a pretty good time for myself back there, you know, in the 60s, the middle to late 60s, like a lot of people did. And I sowed my wild oats, you know, but like a lot of people then, I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm not being a nice girl. I said, I don't want to be a nice girl anymore. You know, I had a good time, and I was fairly rebellious, I suppose. But now it's sort of settled in, and I'm probably, you know, the product of all those years of experience.